Yo, let's talk about Japan. Japan is such an interesting topic now to talk about, like this type of country, Japan. Let's talk about Japan, which is situated right here. Japan is located in East Asia. Here's Japan. Here's China. All these countries. Here's Japan in East Asia. Let's talk about Japan. Maybe I should stand next to the world map. Obviously, again, situated there, Japan. Why am I talking about Japan? Why would you talk about Japan? It's such a fucking stupid. It seems like this video is just gonna be fucking dumb shit. It's like, why am I talking about Japan as a country? Why am I talking about Japan? It's so interesting to me because Japan. You look at like different types of countries in this planet. Like there's specific countries that create more cultural value. What is this thing that I'm talking about? Cultural value. Like what does a country produce in terms of like its culture? What does it produce? Because you look at like in terms of like like the UK, England, which is where I am right now. What does England, the UK produce? Like in terms of like British culture, what is that? What is British culture? It's like the English language obviously is a part of British culture, and you have all of these like little things that are like about British culture. British culture is kind of like about tea and all that type of stuff, and like this type of way of life and stuff, and the way they dress and all that type of stuff, and the dialects of English and stuff. They have like this type of British accent and all that type of stuff. That's what the UK produces in terms of this is what I mean by culture. In terms of like you look at all these different types of countries around the planet. You got in terms of Europe, you got the UK, then you got France, and like all these like types of countries and stuff. They have cultures and stuff, right? And then you have East Asia, you got China, Mongolia, and in South Asia you got that, India and stuff, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, then you got Persia, Iran, and you have Arabia, and all these types of other countries around the world and stuff. Culture, in terms of like, it's very, very interesting in terms of like culture, what like the countries that produce the most amount of like influential culture, there would have to be the USA, obviously, in regards to like Hollywood and stuff like that, in terms of like movies and like pop culture, Hollywood. I do believe it's like America and Japan are on top of the world in terms of like producing culture that like kind of influences the end. In terms of like producing in terms of like culture, America and Japan are on top of the world. Why America? Because you obviously, in terms of pop culture, you got like all of like these movies, superhero movies, all of that type of stuff was developed in America, in the USA, here in the United States. Superheroes, all these types of different superheroes, not just superheroes, all these other types of things. Hollywood, all those sorts of things was developed in like the USA. I do believe in terms of like producing, like in terms of like cultural, in terms of like impact, in terms of like culture impacting the world, I do believe that America, the USA, America, and like Japan are like at the top, but specifically Japan, because I'm talking about like the USA, and I told you already about like the fact that you got like not anime, but you got in terms of like American culture, you got like Hollywood, and you have like Avengers, these superhero movies and all that type of stuff, and like a little bit like music as well to some extent. I don't know about music to a large extent, but R&B, and maybe is that American or is that African American? Michael Jackson, African American. It's like all these little subcultures, but still from America, though, still from here in the USA. In terms of like culture, America's like really dominating the world. Like in terms of like spreading culture around. What do I mean by culture? It's so weird. What's this guy talking about? Culture. In terms of like spreading, like in terms of like culture, like what do I mean? It's so vague. Culture. America's like really dominating the planet in terms of like spreading its own cultural like stuff around culture. Like what countries produce the most influential cultural norms and stuff like that, and trends and all that? The USA really dominating the globe, the planet. Really dominating the planet in terms of like producing like very like influential like cultural things and stuff like that. But this video is about Japan. Why am I talking about Japan? Because for America I already said that, like like you got like a little bit of like what is it? Fucking off the top of my head, I forgot. For America you got fucking you got Hollywood and these superhero movies and all that type of stuff, and Marvel and DC, and African American cultures there as well. So you got like Michael Jackson and all these types of musicians and singers and stuff like that from America. I'm also not talking about Japan, because Japan, in terms of like culture, I believe Japan is like on the same level as America in terms of like really producing like very influential like culture stuff. What do I mean by culture? It's kind of vague. In terms of like shaking the world with its culture, like that's what America's did, right? America's kind of shook the entire world with its culture, with Hollywood and all these superhero movies and all that type of stuff, and cartoons and shows and all that. America's like shook the world with its culture. There's not a lot of countries that can do that. Sweden or like these Scandinavian countries, Okay, fair enough. Maybe the Vikings. Fair enough. Maybe the Vikings. But other than the Vikings, Sweden, Scandinavia hasn't really shook the world with its culture. Or you know, like let's just say Greece or Bulgaria. Has Bulgaria or Greece, these countries in Europe, have they shook the world with their culture? Do you know anything about like Bulgaria or Greece? No, you don't. What about fucking let's just say what about like Mongolia? Obviously Genghis Khan and some of the history, but like in terms of like Mongolian culture, has that shook the entire world? No. The USA and Japan has literally shook the entire world, the entire planet with its culture. That's so interesting. Culture, in terms of culture, think about it. America has shook the entire world with its culture. We all like kind of like, we do stuff like that's related to the USA and its culture and stuff. Think about it very carefully. Think very carefully about this. It's so interesting in terms of like, it's like a very like social like social interesting like social like kind of conception. Like it's interesting in terms of like from a sociological perspective that culture can kind of really like what like a country's culture can literally like dominate and stuff and like kind of influence so many other types of civilizations and peoples and stuff and ethnicities and stuff. Specifically, you know, the USA in terms of like its culture. What specific things about the USA and its culture? What has that? How has that shook the world? You know, like rock and stuff like that. I know it's might not necessarily be from the US, but it has really took like a stance there and stuff. Not just rock, Hollywood, all these superhero movies, all that's from the USA. The USA has really shook the entire world with its culture. Likewise, Japan, what now? Because the topic of this video is let's talk about Japan. Japan has really shook the entire world with its culture. I do believe so. Anime, obviously, a lot of us, we know about anime. It doesn't matter, like, you can go to anyone on this planet and he'll talk about anime and the guy would have like some type of clue about what you're saying. Anime, a lot of us we know about anime. A lot of us we know about like anime. A lot of us we know about like manga and all these types of things. Japan has shook the world with its culture. Japan is literally on the same level as the United States of America. That is so insane. That's so interesting in terms of like shaking the world with its culture. I do believe it's like America and Japan. They're like, Japan is like so unique. All the other, I mean, obviously K-pop and Korea and stuff like that. It's kind of like whatever, Korea's whatever, but Japan's like really dominating, has shook the entire planet with its culture. Japan, everybody knows about anime, everybody knows about like all these little things to do with Japan, like the Shinto temples, all these types of like samurais and katanas, all these types of things. Everybody knows a little bit about Japan and Japanese culture and anime and manga, and that's so interesting to me. And you know, America has shook the entire world with its culture as well. That's kind of interesting. Japan, let's talk about Japan. Japan has like literally shook the entire world with its like culture and stuff. It's so interesting to me. Isn't that interesting that Japan has shook the entire world with its culture? That is so interesting. Think about it. Everybody knows about anime, manga, all these types of things. Why am I talking about this? So what the fuck is the point of this video? Because it's so interesting if you carefully analyze this and think about it. Which specific countries shake the world with their culture? That's so important. You know like Iran, nobody gives a fuck about, like, really, what nobody cares about Iran, all these like Arab countries and all these other types of countries here in the Middle East and Turkey, all these types of countries, fucking who gives a fuck about them? What are they doing to shake the world with their culture? Not a lot. America, you have Hollywood, all these types of things from the USA, and then in terms of like Japan, you have anime, manga, these types of things are really shaking the world and like changing people's minds and mentality and feelings and emotions. That's interesting. So interesting, just in terms of like from a sociological perspective. It's so interesting, these types of countries. There's specific countries that they shake the world with their culture. That's so interesting. Japan is shaking the world with its culture. It's so interesting. Isn't it interesting that Japan is shaking the world with its culture? Anime, manga, everybody knows about that. Samurai katana. I don't have to really give you too much of like a mental picture of like what Japan is about. You can kind of get that. You can kind of conceptualize it on your own. Japan has shook the entire world with its culture. It's so interesting to me. Not just Japan, but you got also the United States of America and these other types of countries. They've shook the entire planet with their culture. And it's kind of very interesting. And culture is so important. Having like making sure that your country, its culture is like very dominating. Look at Germany. Look at these other European countries. Really, Germany, like the German language, I do believe in like a couple of centuries the German language is going to become obsolete. The German language is just going to kind of fade into obscurity. It's going to become irrelevant, the German language, because only people from Germany speak the German language. English is not only from the UK, but you got people from America, from Australia, some of these other types of countries. The English language really, America has really fucking popularized it and put it at the forefront of humanity, the English language. That's so interesting. English, which is from England, the English language is from England. And now the English language is like, it's spread all around the globe now. Everybody knows a little bit of English. Isn't that interesting? It's so interesting. English, which was from like this tiny shitty little island, the UK, it has spread all around the planet and everybody knows a little bit about English. That is so interesting. Isn't that interesting? Everybody knows about English. Isn't that so interesting? That's what I'm talking about in terms of like culture, because you look at like these European countries, like Germany isn't shaking the world, France isn't shaking, I know Spain because you got like Latin America or whatever, Italy, all these like European countries, their cultures are going to go extinct. I do believe so. I do believe so. Their cultures, their languages are going to become extinct because like what Scandinavia, who like only people from Scandinavia speak those types of Scandinavian languages, Swedish, Norwegian, whatever. These languages are going to become obsolete in the next couple of centuries. German's going to become obsolete. Deutsch, maybe, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. See, I'm even forgetting Italian. All these countries, they're going to like slowly become obscure and irrelevant. English is going to like dominate the entire globe, for sure. And that's what I really mean by like, that's why I want to make this video, because you know, Japan. Imagine Japan, imagine if the Japanese didn't create manga and anime, all these types of things. Japan would be like so irrelevant. It would be like Japanese culture would be like worse off. But I do believe because of the fact that the Japanese, they were really like focusing on like developing their culture and like their arts and stuff like that. They've really put themselves ahead of all the entire like East Asian countries, and their cultures are now spreading around the world. Japan is like shaking the world with its culture, just like how America is shaking the world with its culture. And these specific countries, they are like dominating our politics and our everything and stuff. It's so interesting from a sociological perspective that there's these specific countries and they just dominate everything in terms of like culture and social stuff and whatever. It's so interesting, man. So interesting that there's these specific countries and they dominate everything with their culture. They shake the world with its culture. They shake the world with its culture. It's so interesting, man. It's so interesting. There's these specific countries. You got Japan there and America, and they shake the world with its culture, with their cultures. Everybody knows about anime, manga, all that type of stuff. Everybody knows about like Hollywood and all these types of things. America is literally, I mean, it sounds like some fucking typical brown terrorist guy talking about that. No, but this video is about Japan anyway. I don't know why I'm fucking about with America. Fucking shit. Japan has shook the world with its culture. Japan is like fucking so like influential and dominant and etc. and stuff, and I can keep going on and on. Japanese culture, everybody knows about anime, manga. It's so interesting in terms of like culture. Like what have the Japanese did for humanity is like they really like shared their culture. Nintendo, all these gaming things and franchises, Sega and all that type of stuff. Japan has literally shook the entire world with its culture and stuff. It's so interesting, just like America. That is so interesting. Isn't that interesting that there's these types of... Only America and Japan, I think they're the only countries that are shaking the world with their culture. Germany, nobody really cares about Germany, France, all these European countries, East Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, African countries. What the fuck are they doing? They need to fucking do something, man. Only America and Japan's really hitting the world hard with their culture. You know, Japan, so interesting, man. Not just Japan, obviously Korea, K-pop. Still though, Japan's kind of like so unique, isn't it? Like so unique. All of us were a little bit fascinated with Japan when we were younger. Come on, I know all of us were for sure. All of us, we have like some type of like memories of Japan when we were like a little bit younger and stuff. Japanese culture, it has fascinated some of us. Come on, even if you think that it's kind of like a little bit weird, artistic to care about like Japanese culture, it kind of makes you like kind of like a weeaboo or whatever. It's kind of like, it makes you kind of like weird to care about their culture and stuff. It is kind of a little bit weird. I'm not too obsessed with Japanese culture, by the way. I'm just making this type of video to really to highlight the fact that the Japanese, they have like kind of like influenced the entire world with their culture. Everybody knows about like everybody knows a little bit about Japanese culture, like the anime and stuff, and the manga and the katanas and the samurai stuff and all that type of stuff. It's very interesting. It's so interesting how the Japanese, they just managed to like excel their culture. They spread their culture all across the globe. It's so interesting. Obviously, maybe I'm being there's so many like other types of countries in East Asia, you know, but they're not that relevant and stuff like that. They're not as relevant because their culture isn't that as stimulating. I don't know. I'm not too sure about it, but you know, the Japanese, they've really managed to like put themselves ahead of everyone else, and it's kind of I do admire the Japanese. I like how they're so like hardworking. They have like this drive inside of them. They're so hardworking. They're motivated. They're very disciplined. All of them, all these like caricatures and stereotypes about them. You know, like how a Japanese guy, he has a business and he just works all day. He goes into like some type of facility and he just works all day until he gets the job done, and then he comes back home and then he consumes food with his family and etc. And he just goes back and works all day and comes back in and then blah 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 blah. It's so fascinating and interesting to me. Japanese culture, the caricatures, the stereotypes, the Japanese as a people, they're very respectable. I'm not a weeaboo, I'm not into their culture in like such a fucking dramatic way. It's so interesting to think about them though, Japanese culture. Everybody, well, a lot of us, we all know a little bit about Japanese culture and stuff. It's kind of interesting, I don't know. Isn't it interesting, Japanese culture? It's so fascinating and interesting, isn't it? The caricature, stereotypes, all that type of stuff. I wonder, you know, Chinese culture. China's a bit bigger in terms of like politics. China might be more influential, but you know, Chinese culture, is it really shaking the world? I don't believe so. A lot of us, we don't really know too much about Chinese culture. What do you know about, what things do you know about that's from China? You might say that like fried rice, chicken noodles, stuff like that. I don't know, like some dumb shit. You don't know any really technical. You don't know all the technical things about China. But in Japan, a lot of us, we can think about samurais and katanas, and we can think about like the Japanese language and culture and stuff in the anime and the mangas. It's kind of interesting. I think America at the moment right now, America in terms of like shaking the world with their culture, in terms of like cultural influences, culture like spreading across different nations. I believe America is like really dominating that type of regard. In that regard, America's really dominating the planet, and Japan is also really dominating the planet in regards to like propagating its culture. These specific countries, they really like hit hard, and they really do like propagate. They propagate and they kind of change the trajectory of other nations so dramatically and stuff. Japanese culture, I do admire the Japanese people and stuff. They're specifically all these like. Not all of them are, obviously Japanese people, like you can't like, a lot of them are going to be kind of cuntish and dickish. Maybe I'm being kind of a dumbass. Maybe I don't admire Japanese people, but I do admire their culture to some extent. Maybe perhaps there's some weird shit as well, but I do enjoy like a lot of the art design of the anime characters and like a lot of the video game stuff that comes from there and stuff. And maybe not the people, actually maybe I'm a dumbass. A lot of the people might be kind of weird to be around, but you know, the culture is definitely interesting for sure. And some of the caricatures and stereotypes of the Japanese, that they're super hardworking and disciplined, that's also something admirable, just like the Germans, although Germany is kind of like, not that important anymore. I don't know, it's kind of becoming, I don't know, Germans, what do the Germans make? I don't know. It's kind of like in World War II, it's like the Germans and the Japanese and stuff, they were like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting though to me. I don't know to think about this, but the Japanese, super interesting people. And the Japanese, they're really shaking the world with their culture. Think about it. Everybody knows about like anime, katanas, samurai, all these types of things. It's so interesting to me, isn't it? So interesting that everybody, we all know a little bit about like Japanese culture, and the Japanese have done so many different types of things, and Nintendo and Sega, and even in our childhood, even if you don't like Japanese people too much, you probably like experience some of the in your childhood, you probably have like some influences from Japan, like in terms of like the video games. If you played if you were young, you probably played Mario, you probably played Zelda, and all these types of things. All that came from Japan. Do you know that? Sega was founded by, all that came from Japan. Nintendo, you see the etymology of that name, Nintendo, Sega, all these things came from Japan. PlayStation, Sony, from Japan. Look, the Sony PS5. Came from Japan. Even if you believe that, even if you think that you're not too concerned about Japanese culture, you probably have been influenced by Japanese culture in so many different types of ways. You're not even going to be too cognizant of it. If you play like Mario, Zelda, all that type of stuff, you've been influenced by Japanese culture. Japanese culture has really shook the planet just as much as American culture has, and that's so fascinating that Japan and America, they're kind of really dominating the planet so far. You might be like, no, I don't like Japanese culture, I fucking hate it. But you probably played Mario, Zelda, or something, Nintendo, you probably have a Wii console, Nintendo console. That's Japanese culture for you. You've been influenced by Japanese culture. That's so interesting, isn't it? That's so interesting. The Japanese, man. You gotta give them a lot of respect. You gotta respect them. They shook the planet with their culture, and I don't want this video to be too long, and that's about it. You know, Japan is super interesting.